Good day, dear friends. I'm happy to welcome you all at this annual GAIDAR Forum. My name is Tatiana Zhuravleva. I'm the Director of Quality of Life Practices, Agency for Strategic Initiatives. And we are going to talk about the new mission of cities with high scientific and technological potential. In Russia, there are 1,117 cities, and 600 of them, they were built as industrial cities in the 20th century. When we work with cities, we may think that they are not developing, they are still living in the past, and they need some boost of development. They need to understand how to move on to the post-industrial era of the 21st century. Every fourth out of these 564 cities, they do have high scientific and technological potential. They produce 50% of high-tech products of Russia. There are 120 million of highly specialized people living, and we need to make sure that we increase this potential and create environment which will be comfortable and interesting for people to move there, and not only specialists themselves, but also their families. And we are going to talk about the experts. And experts are Alexander Lomakin, First Deputy Minister of Construction, Housing and Communal Services. Andrey Polosin, he will talk to us online. He is a director of the Department for Interaction with Regions, ROSATOM. Oleg Rurin, Deputy General Director, Housing and Public Utilities Reform Support Fund. And Artem Fedorko, Deputy General Director of DOM.RF. First of all, a question to First Deputy Minister of Construction of Russia. So in Russia, we have lots of classification of cities. There are small cities, medium cities, large cities, and mega cities. So we are talking about special financing which depends on the amount of population, infrastructural loans, and here it's very important to know what's the population of a certain city. Is it rational to start thinking not only about using this structure, but also thinking about the expertise potential, or maybe it's possible to use some additional criteria and parameters? Dear colleagues, dear friends, that's a very important and interesting question. And we need to know that such approaches, they are being used already now. So you talked about the infrastructural budgetary loans as one of the tools for infrastructure investment. And I would say that when we look at different applications, we take into account such criteria as the development of industry in a certain city, innovations in the region, creation of jobs. And yes, such type of approach is already used. We don't have very narrow specialization. We understand that as of now, more than 50% of population of Russia, they live in cities, small, medium, large cities. And if we want to develop, we need to develop cities. That's extremely important. And results of the last years, they do show that all the tools, or the majority of tools for the development, they were launched already. And that's what the president of the country before New Year, he mentioned in one of his speeches. And that's all is possible due to the host of measures that we use. We have a special CARTE program. That's a legal one. I would say that this is like the set of legal tools which will allow cities to achieve full-scale development, comprehensive development of the territory. We also have the infrastructure menu, which is and there are participants such as DOM.RF, Utilities Fund, with the FMB investments which are there in this program. So this is the set of tools, and we start using them and see some first positive results. Together with the Ministry of Economy, together with Rostriester, we are creating one more new tool which will help us with other large-scale urban development projects. So that's the Institute of Spatial Development. We understand that the territory of Russia is very diverse, and different regions have some peculiarities. And cities are different not only by the amount of population, by revenue, by the level of standard of living, but all cities are very different. We need to improve the methodology for urban building, and this program of special development will help us with that. We understand that we need to pay special attention to urban planning. Basically, that's it. Alexander, so this Special Development Institute, is it something that deals with agglomerations or rather small and medium cities? Yes, as I've said, there is a serious difference in the development of small and medium cities. Of course, agglomerations, they will show maximum effect very quickly if you apply such programs. But right now, there are some advocates of developing territories through agglomerations, and there are advocates of another approach, developing through small and medium cities. And we need to find a balance here, because Russia is a big country, and we can't focus exclusively on developing agglomerations. We have lots of people living in medium cities, and then we will have to find a balance. Because according to some of the programs, such as KGS program, and there is a competition for smaller cities, that's the two-edged support for cities, but we still see some skewedness when such cities with the population of 10,000 people, they don't get enough investments and they can't implement major projects which are possible for megacities. It was, you were very correct mentioning the program of creating comfortable urban environment, but we also need to remember about the tourism development program. We have lots of unique, extremely beautiful destinations in Russia. They are unique from the nature, from the cultural point of view. And if we develop such destinations, this will be a great boost for development for smaller cities. Now my question to Andrey. Andrey, ROSATOM, as we know, works with territories of presence. There are more than 25 territories, and there you implement major social projects. So what's your view? There is the special program for scientific cities, and according to this program, you can get special financing for developing comprehensive projects. So we have 13 officially science cities. But ROSATOM, for example, is present in 25 cities, and all of your cities of presence have huge scientific importance. Is it logical to expand this definition of science cities? Maybe there will be such definition as the territories of ROSATOM or territories of presence of other state corporations. Tatiana, good day, dear colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank Alexander for his approach. What he does is very valuable. I'll be very frank, saying that until the year 2021, we were interacting with the regions of Russia, and we thought that such cities, some of them are cities with high scientific potential, but the authorities didn't support this definition. And in the year 2021, we achieved a breakthrough, and there were lots of special activities. So despite all the pandemic activities, pandemic restrictions, which were valid for different cities, such as Moskovsk, for example. So all these activities were dedicated to discussing the standards of living of people. So if the standard of living is higher, the city becomes more attractive, but and eventually there will be more production manufactured in a certain industry. So historically, we know that in Russia, we have lots of industrial facilities focused, for example, defense facilities in cities which are very far from agglomerations. And for us, we clearly understood that it's not possible to do like that. We can't solve all the issues very quickly and simultaneously. We were trying to invent some tools for support of the regions because we wanted to develop the social sphere in our cities of presence. We traditionally have three different positions, those which are in line with the ESG principles. I mean, actions improved at improving governance, improving the quality of infrastructure, and improving social processes at a certain territory. And depending on the level of maturity, we were deciding on what to do. As for science cities, I think that the law on science cities is not a workable one. And there is also the law on ZATO, scientifically intensive cities. We work with that, and we work with this territory extensively. It's not important only to have a clear definition, to have a separate category for certain cities, but we need to make sure that definitions are in line with the goals of development of such factories. So more than half of our employees, they work in cities, and scientific and engineering groups, industrial groups, all of them are located in such cities because there are good scientific schools, there are engineering dynasties living, there are technologies which are the intrinsic parts of such territories that they can't develop if they are removed to another territory. So, industrial forces. There's something very clear, understandable for Rosatom Corporation. But industrial relations, what is that? As of now, there are lots of issues which have to do with the standard of living. And we shouldn't use just general approach, but we need to understand that people should feel comfortable. And we need to understand specifically which services are required, taking into account certain industrial relations. Service and infrastructural model, which we developed together with my colleagues from the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. We started working on them in 2020-2021. I think it's rather promising effort, and starting from 2023, we can start implementing the set of activities at certain territories, which will be considered as important ones for national development. There is the challenge and lots of responsibility. But on our side, we understand this responsibility, and when this law on the group of collective taxpayers expires, we won't be able to provide subsidies for the development of a social infrastructure for territory. And we will continue such work of developing social processes still. We understand that improving the quality of governance, that's what we will continue doing. But as there are some tasks set by Rosatom on the Russian market, we can't we as a commercial company, we'd like to have lots of funds for such tasks, but we will not be allowed to do that by our own supervisory body, which and there are members of federal authorities, of course, because we are the state corporation. So we need to provide justification of the development of social processes at territories. For us, that's a key issue. That's the key issue because we want to engage labor resources and we want to maintain competences which were gathered at a certain territory. So that's my answer. And being more specific, if we simply get a certain status, I don't think that this is the solution. We need to have a very clear description for the infrastructural model. And we need to create subcategories and we need to put together the program for implementing these solutions. Andrey, thank you very much. The topic of services is a very high priority. So this relation between soft and hard is a challenge. Sometimes we have master plans, which is worth several billion, and we can implement only 10 or 15% of this master plan. And I have a question to Artem. DOM.RF is working a lot with the residential policy. You also do a lot in master planning. How can we do master plans? How can we develop cities if we want to make sure that master plans are implementable? So they're not just the concepts, not just the pictures, but they are real tools of working with the urban environment. You're absolutely right. So that's the human capital which is there, which is the basis. People who are able to create a new high-tech economy based on the latest scientific developments. And we know that the best companies are technological companies globally. Though such companies, they use their talents, and on the basis of that, they create new value, new economy. And I think that we should focus on people, and we should focus on the environment where people live, work, rest, and create value, of course. And each element is important here. This is the modern environment for the work, for scientific activities. So that's modern office centers, co-working zones, zones for professional communication. So that's professional environment for people to live. And we see that lots of people now move back to some individual houses, and prices for private homes increased significantly because people value this privacy, this new quality of living. That's the environment people communicating. And here we have to focus on public spaces, on the zones where people interact, where people can get inspired and create new ideas. So when these environments, they concur, here we can create new capabilities of cities that we are talking about. So I think that there is this request to create a new, modern, urban environment which will help us to maintain the community of high professionals. Our company, DOM.RF, has, as you've said, a lot of experience of developing master plans for small cities, and also master plans for the so-called scientific cities. They are different in some regards, but I would say that there are some general components in a modern economy, and all of that could be applicable to scientific cities. So the modern standards of urban planning and creation of public spaces, they should be the priority. With regards of the public state mechanisms, what could we do? As Alexander said, last year we created the comprehensive development mechanism, and this mechanism lets us use different characteristics to develop territories in the comprehensive manner, solve issues which seemed to be not possible to achieve.
Well, it's always about the tool that we use, and maybe I can address Alexander here. Talking about master plan, for example, take the master plan of Zarechny with the nuclear power plant, and then we can take the master plan of Pushchino. Both cities have a very large scientific potential. The first one is a scientific city, and they have very significant research resources. And the second one is a modern city. It implements all the modern solutions. Today, we see that there is a request for bringing these all the principles of both cities together. Can we implement that in one master plan? Well, thank you for giving me the floor. This year, we decided to, in fact, finally implement the definition of master plan in our civil construction code. Well, I think there are some people applauding to you in the audience today. Right. In fact, we've been talking for a long time that we need master plans, the master plans that would incorporate the systematic approach and that would take into consideration providing the comfort of living in the city and considering all the other economic processes too. But today, for example, we do not have such a parameter as comfort taken into consideration in the definition of master plan. We are talking about the development of territories, but comfort is not part of those parameters. So our aim is to, in fact, articulate this parameter in the legislation. We need to put in all the components of this notion. The master plan has to provide not only for nice benches and trees, we need to take into consideration the nice organization of the transportation system for cars, the improvement of people's life. So that's the task we've set in front of ourselves for this year. I'd like to add, in fact, the pandemic, it allowed us to switch to new formats of work. Right now we're working remotely, and we know that it is so across the globe. And because of that transition, the overall picture of competition has changed. Before, we had large cities competing between and with each other. Today, we see that small cities, they can compete with large cities of the global scale. And they can compete in terms of, for example, the quality of communities, the quality of expert communities, the communities that are brought together by the sphere of their competence and by the environment that gives them enough resources to develop their potential and to attain their goals. From that point of view, the requirements of master plans and the requirements to the environment, they are being aligned. They are brought to a common standard, and it becomes these requirements become the same for small cities and Moscow, for example. And from that point of view, the bar of quality has been raised significantly. Well, thank you for that. We know that our next speaker has a principle of his own. He has a principle that he in fact picked up in the capital. He thinks that you need to be able to treat yourself to serenity, cottage cheese pies in any city of Russia in the morning. There is yet another aspect that I'd like to discuss, talking about cities with high potential. This question is about the mission or ideology or goal of the city. We remember that back in the Soviet times, cities were being built for specific objectives. For example, there was a state goal, or the federal goal, as we would call it today, set for every city. Can we talk about that today? Because we know that there are cities with creative potential, for example, with cultural potential, with other potentials. Can we define that for every city, or you think that all the cities are multitasking in that way? Alexander, let's start with you. Well, I think there is an answer that was part of your question. I think the mono cities that were created back in the Soviet times, they are becoming extinct. They are less and less numerous. And, well, Artem mentioned that too. Why small cities or mid-sized cities are competing, and quite successfully, with large cities? Well, it's because they actually drive from a narrow profile. Today, they are offering comfortable environment for all types of people's activities, including education, healthcare, culture, etc., etc. Okay, so we are saying that this new mission of cities has multiple objectives. Andrey, please, over to you, of course. Alexander, thank you. In fact, we understand your position, but I'd like to suggest a correction. I think you'll agree with me. All the cities are different, right? And among all those different cities, there are those for which the basic definition of objective is a priority. It is a priority to set a specific objective. Very often, we were seeing those programs for mono cities, and we have a list of those territories. We introduced 8 more into that. And those cities, they correspond to the definition of mono cities. But the programs of their development are aimed at diversifying businesses or developing yet another area for industrial production or for tourism sometimes. But but this program of development for those nuclear cities is very important to the local population, for example. Take Voronezh. Near Novo-Voronezh, there is an ancient settlement that was discovered there. If, for example, there is a program suggesting touristic routes passing through that settlement, and that will stimulate local economy. In fact, we cannot agree to that in the case of Novovoronish, because one of the conditions of organizing Novovoronish is safe, is an opportunity of a child walking safely around the city or certain area during the daytime. And the tourist route would change that. So for the majority of our cities, I'm afraid I have to state that the development of multiple objectives and the development of different industries, unfortunately, will threaten the presence of population that is key to the same industries. Well, we're not saying that it is so and it cannot be organized somehow, but that is the particularity of those cities. And we've seen them in many industries and cities, the cities that are built around mining industries, oil extraction industries. Norilsk Nickel has faced these programs ROSATOM. So, on one hand, diverse development is important. On the other hand, for example, children's safety is important, or quality of school education, or cultural projects, continuous cultural projects and programs being held in those regions. Then measures being continuously taken to improve the urban environment and implementation of modern technologies. We understand that today we are working within the paradigm of leveling all the budgetary efforts. Until it is so, we will not be able to go beyond the modern legal framework, even if the new projects take off. We understand that so far this new format is still not a comprehensive solution for all the cities. But at the same time, the infrastructure needs to be improved. Thank you very much, Andrey. Actually, I was leading up to exactly the same conclusion. Today, when we are talking about mid-sized and large cities, about their diversity, about their mission, we see that there are many cities that fall under this category, and they say that, well, in fact, we agree to the majority of those objectives, but not to all of them. So probably we need to come up with a master planning tool that would take into consideration all the particularities of these cities. Answer. Well, I think we can take into consideration all the particularities of these cities, and coming back to the discussion about narrowing the specialization or diversification, well, the golden middle is right in the middle. I think that today we focus more and more on the sustainable development, and the sustainable development can be provided for when you have diversification. When you provide for the diversification of the economy inside cities and you diversify your value creation centers. Take a person. What is best for a person? For example, is it best to become a specialist in one specific area, or is it best to invest your time into studying something more general or going to the meta level? Well, indeed it is so. And for cities, for example, we have not only specialists, we have families. And families are not interested in what specialists are interested in. Right. I think that we still need to go for diversification, but we need to look at different ways of achieving that. If you, for example, looking at a city that is focusing on nuclear industry, should it go for tourism too? Probably not. but maybe we can look at other dimensions that could support and balance the trajectory of development for that city. Right. Maybe it could be good to take into consideration that principle in developing master planning tools, and maybe that will be used for new cities too. Well, we've been talking about the mission, the strategy, but there are very practical matters too. Utilities. I think the state of utilities, the communications being worn out is a buzzword, is a problem that everyone is sad about for a very long time already. The low quality of communal services is assessed to 30 to 90%, and probably that's the second problem that is named right after the quality of healthcare services. And what do you think? What should we come up with? What kind of solution? Well, probably here we need to talk about an end-to-end solution. Of course, we need to modernize utilities and communal services. Talking about cities with extensive scientific potential, well, probably the overall level of competence is of importance. The authorities have to be competent enough to manage all the utilities. They need to be active enough to generate ideas and to promote those ideas. Usually we see that the most active cities are regional centers and those cities with the big scientific and human potential. From the point of view of utilities wariness, well, over the last 2 years, we've been actively involved in digitalizing the infrastructure itself. We've solved this issue across the country for water supply system. Right now we're finishing digitalization of water diversion systems. We are launching the project of digitalization of heat supply systems. And all that is aligned with the coming up with new digital tools that Alexander was talking about. This year we're planning on making a quality leap in order to install an end-to-end comprehensive understanding of all the processes. So we want to generate the comprehensive understanding of all the utilities. We need to be aware of the status of these utilities. Then we will switch to organizing monitoring of the state of those systems, and then we will be setting KPIs for those systems. So that's what we are doing. That's quite a labor-intensive and resources-intensive process. We are now setting up this work stream, and that will allow us to drive financing to the aspects where the financing is most needed. Thank you. How open will this information be? Because, for example, for master planning, it has to be provided. At least the basic master planning documents have to be open. Well, we are still thinking about it. In fact, for many work streams, we keep all the collected data open. For example, everything that is related to housing overhaul housing repair works. All the data is open there. We have a lot of systems connected to our system, and they collect the data for the data to be available when they're needed, when they're required for analysts and experts' work. For utilities infrastructure, well, we're still working on data accessibility there. We're still trying to balance risks and interests, and we will come up with a format of data disclosure. These data, this information will be available for both authorities and businesses, because indeed it is very important and very much in demand. Colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you for this fruitful and very productive discussion. I think we've touched upon many very important matters. I think master planning was an especially important topic. Thank you very much, and see you soon.